Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'm going to be playing the Tree Men, or actually the Wood Elves, and I'm going to be facing off against the Beastmen, so definitely a fun time. And it looks like my opponent actually brought Malagor the Dark Omen, so this is going to be probably the first game since the DLC launched that I haven't seen Morgr the Shadow gave, so very, very cool stuff. So as far as my army composition goes, I have a front line which is a combination of Treekin and War Dancers. So I feel like they're a pretty good combination against the Beastmen because the Treekin are very, very sturdy. They have 5,922 HP. So that means essentially the 9 models that do exist in their little battalion there, they all have very, very high individual HP pools. So when joined with the Lore of Life, the Spellslinger, and the healing abilities, these guys just last forever. And then on top of that, they do have a base 20% resistance against physical attacks, I believe. So it makes them very, very hard to kill for low-tier Beastmen infantry like Gore Herds and Ungors and things like that. And they're just so sturdy. Just one of my favorite units. Very, very tanky. And then on top of that, I do have War Dancers. So as you can see, I kind of have an alternating formation here. Treekin, War Dancer, Treekin, War Dancer, etc., etc. And the War Dancers are just masters at slaying low-tier Beast infantry. They will just cut Ungors, Gore Herds, all those guys to pieces, like extremely fast. So it's pretty nice because, again, a lot of times Beastmen will just have, Ungors and Gore Herds to kind of absorb the front line while they really do damage with, the Minotaurs and Gorbals and things like that. But these guys will just cut that front line to pieces and then will essentially allow you to collapse on the more valuable units that the Beastmen have. So very big fan of these guys in the Beastmen matchup. I'm looking forward to experimenting with them more. Granted, they are very squishy. They only have 15 armor. So, again, they're going to, they're going to give it, but they're also going to take it. So you got to take it with a grain of salt there. I do have a Spellslinger with the Lore of Life, Big Papa Durthu, and then I have 2 Waystalkers on each wing. I'm a big fan of these guys. The Arrow of Kurnus is quite strong. And then in the back, I do have the Wildwood Rangers. So these guys are so freaking cool here. They have anti-large, firstly. They also have armor piercing with 45 weapon strength, so they do so good against Minotaurs. They can cut Gorbals to pieces, just an all-around solid unit. And even against fodder, with 45 weapon strength and 41 melee attack, they're going to be cutting people to shreds for sure. So I'm a big fan of these Wildwood Rangers. And that's pretty much it for my army, guys. Just kind of it's not quite a Death Star. I suppose it's kind of close, but it's just more of an infantry-heavy army. And, the Beastmen with Harpies and, all their mobility, it's pretty hard to keep, Glade Guards and things like that protected. So, again, I just opted to do more of a headstrong kind of, infantry-style build. So, and again, these Waystalkers, they do their job. That's plenty of ranged attacks for me. My opponent's army, he has Gorbal. He actually has 2 groups of Minotaurs. So he has the shielded variant, so he's going to lead the charge. And then on top of that, and it's kind of funny, the Gorbals actually, or the Minotaurs have a silver shield, whereas Ironbreakers have a bronze one. I always found that to be pretty funny. I suppose they are bigger shields, though. But still, so he has a front line of these Minotaurs with shields, then he has the great weapons in the back. So if he's able to get these on Durthu or some of my other, Treekin, these guys will definitely go to work chopping some lumber. So I have to be careful and make sure to focus these guys down ASAP. The rest of his army, again, like most Beastmen armies, is just fodder. So Ungor Spear Herds, they do have anti-large, which is decent. But yeah, it's just mostly, all across the board, the Ungor Spearman Herd. So these guys are going to get absolutely annihilated by my War Dancers. In the secondary line, he has Gore Herds with shields, the more quote-unquote elite infantry. He has a second Gorbal. He's got Malagor over here with some green stuff coming out of him. And then on top of that, he has a Centaur. So he just has the standard Centaurs. You don't really need the armor-piercing variant because most of the Wood Elves are so low armor. But you can see the Arrows of Kurnus coming in here, and hopefully they'll do some work. But it looks like he has 1, 2, and 3 groups. So that's going to be a lot to deal with. Thankfully, I do have a lot of anti-large and kind of stuff like that, so I should be okay. Not terribly concerned about those guys. So other than that, my opponent's advancing. I'm taking some pot shots right now with my Waystalkers, but, again, they're just on that auto shoot. So I'm deploying my formations. You can see I'm sending these Wildwood Rangers out here to the flank. So this is a very safe flank. These Treekin, even though it's not ideal to fight the Gorbal and these guys with anti-large armor piercing, will be supported by these Wildwood Rangers, and they should do pretty darn good. Over here on this wing, this group of Wildwood Rangers is just kind of getting ready. Unfortunately, they don't have charge defense, so these guys can take a lot of damage from charges, but still, if he comes in here, these guys at least do have, an anti-large bonus and tons of damage, so they'll cut these guys to pieces pretty hard. So I'm forming a bit of a defensive line here. You can see these guys are going to meet those Minotaurs. Unfortunately, my opponent sent some fodder, so what I ended up doing was just pulling them back. And these guys do have 35 move speed to the 40 of these guys, so I pull some Treekin to intercept the fodder, pull these guys back, and wanted to wait for those guys to get in a little tighter. Over here, Durthu is able to use a Flock of Doom, so he gets a nice spread. He hits some of these Ungors. And you can see here that these War Dancers are just cutting these guys to shreds. You can see their HP is going down pretty quick, down to 95 models, and then look, did that just jump from 95 to 84 in like a second? So they'll do pretty good here. I should be able to cut through these flanks, and even over here, you can see these War Dancers have essentially already routed this entire group of Gore Herds and Ungors. So they're doing pretty good for me in the front line. Also, my Wildwood Rangers with their anti-large bonus were essentially able to fend off 3 groups of Centaurs here with the support of these Treekin here with their charge defense and their pretty good armor here. So pretty good situation. My opponent did summon a Cygor in my back line actually, but Durthu, he was made for this. He's gonna, just go King Kong and Godzilla and just mess this guy up back here. So Also, I do have the support of the Waystalker here. It's just going to start shooting at the Cygor. And, you know, again, he does have 389 missile strength, so that's going to be a pretty good situation for me. So with Durthu just continuing to use Flock of Doom, you can see the Wildwood Rangers over here have kind of engaged with the Minotaurs and these other units. And what's nice about the Flock of Doom is it's really going to thin out and essentially route these Ungors, which will then allow my Wildwood Rangers to get where they need to be. So they have some pretty cool attack animations. They kind of remind me of those the elves from the beginning of the Lord of the Rings trilogy at the Battle of Mount Doom, kind of the way they hold their swords and stuff and everything. So pretty cool stuff. But they're in here with the Treekin, which is a pretty ideal situation. The Treekin is just literally a tank and spank. So very, very good stuff. You can see the Ungors are shaken, and they most certainly will not last long. You can see they're getting cleaved pretty good in here. So a lot of his units already routing. These Ungors down to 47 models. These ones down to 67. And, you know, right now I basically am able to collapse the rest of my forces because his entire center line just got, you know, caved in. He does come in with these Centaurs here, though, and is able to get a pretty good wrap on this Waystalker, which is not good. Waystalker, you know, he's a good melee combatant with, it looks like, 310 weapon strength, but still, he doesn't have much armor, so he's going to start taking some damage. Thankfully, he's backed up by his buddy, who just literally is just headshotting these guys right in front of him. So, pretty cool situation. It looks like he did some Legolas shit there and just jumped in and karate chopped those guys. So, pretty cool situation. Also, we're able to get some Treekin over to help. But as far as the main engagement goes, Durthu is in really good shape. And when Durthu is this healthy this late in the game, that's going to be a bad day for you. Because he's extremely hard to kill. And even if I lost this entire pocket of troops here, if I had Durthu and just these few scattered troops here, it'd be very, very hard for my opponent to finish me off. So you can see Malagor here is using some AoE damage spells and doing a little bit of work against these Wildwood Rangers. But kind of his big hoorah was summoning the... yeah, I wish I could have shown you guys that. Durthu actually punched this Gorbel, which is pretty cool. But he's stomping the yard here, putting in some work on these Minotaurs, and you can see all the low-tier fodder troops are running. And now that they're running, the Wildwood Rangers are going to be able to get a nice spread on these Minotaurs here, which is going to be good. You can see the Arrow of Kurnus getting nice contact and just knocking over Malagor. It's a very, very good situation there. Malagor is definitely not as strong as Morker. Morker in this matchup would have made this game a lot harder to deal with for sure, but you know, got to give him props for bringing the OG out, but the OG is definitely not cutting it here. You can see the Minotaurs just getting cut to pieces by the Wildwood Rangers. They have that armor piercing, which isn't as pertinent against Minotaurs, but still having 45 weapon strength and anti-large, you're going to be hitting them pretty hard. Of course, Durthu, he's taking them like a boss. He's got his whip out. He's whipping those bulls, doing his thing. And, you know, for the most part, he just has some Centaurs in here. And they're steady, but, you know, what pockets of resistance he has left are being crushed at this point. So these Centaurs, I keep calling them Cygors, but these Centaurs are scurrying off the battlefield, some Treekin, and this Waystalker actually survived, but he was able to rout off my Spellslinger with those guys before they did rout. You can see even Gorbel's running, and you know, when Gorbel's running, you know, that's a bad time for everyone, guys. So just go ahead and take an overhead look. He does have Malagor, who's still confident despite the fact that literally everything's routing, but he's probably going to get hit with the army losses pretty quickly here. You know, he's down to 44 leadership, and I wonder why he's still confident at 44. It's an interesting kind of metric there, but anyways, that was it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that one. You know, I really like that composition against the Beastmen. Granted, you know, he didn't have the optimal build in bringing Malagor. If he had brought Morker and, you know, maybe summoned some Chaos Spawn behind my War Dancers, had them cut into them, or even just lead the charge and, you know, then have the fodder follow up, I think that would have been a lot better. Malagor summoning the Cygor in my back line, I see what he was trying to do. You know, again, just get, you know, big monstrous unit in my back line, have it, you know, rear charge probably my pocket there. But, you know, again, Durthu is just such a beast duelist. He's very, very hard to deal with, and he can definitely lay the slapping on a Cygor. So, as far as the fodder units go, I mean, you can see the Minotaurs did okay, but 19 kills for how much they cost is definitely not going to cut it. And, you know, again, the Treekin are just so sturdy. And then look at the kills on these Wildwood Rangers and these War Dancers. I mean, they just so good here at cutting through these fodder infantry. So let me know your guys' thoughts on this build. I like it a lot. Been using it against the Beastmen quite a bit. There's a multitude of different variants. You can actually go with the Eternal Guards as well, because they do have anti-large and armor piercing, so they can deal with both the Gorbels and the Minotaurs really well. Against the Beastmen fodder, though, they do okay, but you know, they underperform a little bit. So I think a combination of the War Dancers and the Treekin just to kind of tank and spank in the front line, and then having the Wildwood Rangers to take care of the big threats is pretty good. So good game to my opponent, ABL. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and thanks again for watching, guys. Have an excellent weekend, and Merry Christmas.